today is going to be applicable to both tournaments and cash games. Most of the charts and sims that we're looking at today are really going to be around like the 45 big blind range, which is what you'll see a lot in tournaments. But I'll kind of contextualize it with how things might change in cash, where you're probably going to be at like 100 big blinds. But this concept is going to be incredibly valuable, because when you think about how people get better at poker, it's really like you kind of start pre-flop first, you try to like tighten it up or like at least get your pre-flop ranges, and then this specific scenario is kind of like on the flop. When you think about the most common post-flop formation is big blind versus button, whether it's cash game or tournaments. And I'll say that there are some probably big leaks that people are making, especially in this, from both c-betting on the button, but then especially defending versus a very, very wide c-bet from the button as the big blind. So we'll go into that and we'll talk about how do you start constructing your general continuation range, but really as well as bluffing when we want to be check raising and especially playing an aggressive line. Because even I'm struggling to find some of the check raises that you should be having in theory. And most players are really gonna defend really poorly against check raises all the time, or just not defend enough. So this is a spot where it can be really printing. So let's jump into it. So yeah, today is going to be really focused on flop play. So all the context of all the hands I put up today, we're in the big blind. So the button raised, and we just called out the big blind, and we're playing a single raise pot on the flop. So the first thing I want to start with is continuation thresholds. And I guess, does anyone know what I mean by continuation threshold here? Or want to take a guess? Yeah, go ahead.
I would guess like the minimum hand value you would need to continue in the hand, like call a bet or raise a bet.
Exactly. So these are kind of like the cutoff points to which we want to continue. So continue could be either by calling or raising, anything but folding, effectively. So it's good for us to know what the thresholds are, what are the cutoff points, as that's ultimately what helps us like construct our range. It's easier to remember like what are the specific cutoffs as opposed to try and memorize the range as a whole. So yeah, when we think about our continuation threshold in any format, in any position, facing any sort of aggressive action, this is what we mean by those thresholds. And why do we think continuation thresholds are important?
So you're not bleeding chips if you are going wide.
Yes, so we're not bleeding chips, so we know what are the boundaries. Like instead, it takes it away from being a guessing game of like, should I call this hand, should I fold this hand? Well, if it's clearly above the threshold, then we know we should either be calling or raising, whatever it might be. If it's below, then we're folding. So it helps to give us some clear distinctions and make sure we're not necessarily over folding in spots, or let's say over calling. Any other reasons? Any guesses? So for those who just walked in, we're talking about continuation thresholds, why they're important, to kind of understand those cutoff points for building a range, and then we're just talking about now like why are they important. But I'll just jump into it, which is basically, so stops us from overfolding. So again, it takes away the guesswork. We kind of know what those thresholds are. This is really important, which is, and we'll kind of go into some of these hands that we want to choose, especially on in flop. It really makes our bluffs believable down the line, because one of the most important things in poker, we want to make sure that whatever the run out might be, that we always have bluffs available to us. Because if we start to get certain run outs, like let's say on certain flops, we only check raise with flush, like our obvious equity stuff, like flush draws and straight draws. Every time a flush or a straight completes on the turn, and then let's say we check raise on the turn, our opponents can just exploit us by just like always folding. And then we're just never getting paid with their value. And really how we make money in poker is not by like executing insane bluffs and getting people to fold, but is ultimately the most important thing is we want to get paid with our value. So to get paid with our value, that's the whole purpose of bluffs, is we need to be able to have bluffs, and we need to have believable bluffs. But if we're folding too much on the flop, or we're not check raising with enough of the portion range that we want to be, we don't really have bluffs in certain runouts, and that's really bad for us. So having bluffs that are believable, and then yes, and that bleeds into the third part, which is getting paid with our value. By having the bluffs that are believable, we can get paid with our value on every single run out. Cool. So what I'm gonna go into is kind of, and I'm stealing this from Nick Petrangelo. So for those who don't know, Nick Petrangelo is a regular in the high stakes tournament scene, absolute crusher, tens of millions of dollars in earnings, and also a core part of the GTO lab team. But he kind of like helped build this framework for me around how we think about our bluff check raising range when we're facing a button wide C bet and we're in the big blind, so in a single raise pot. And so he breaks it down into kind of like 3 separate categories. I've just kind of like renamed them to help me better understand them. But the first is strong draws. So this is kind of like our really obvious stuff, right? So like a board like A7-7, we've got the nut flush draw, King 9 suited, Queen X suited, Jack X suited, just any like flush draws, like obvious equity stuff. On this board, there's no straight draws really, but let's say it was like 5-6 Queen or something, and we have 7-8. We've got some open enders. We've got some like gut shots. So this is kind of like our obvious equity stuff, probably stuff that everyone in this room is finding to a reasonable degree. The second category is our weak draws. So this is usually backdoor draws. There's some interaction with a portion of the board. So for example, like the 10-8 suited on this board, the 10 and the 8 kind of wrap around the 7. So we've got some backdoor straight potential. We've got backdoor flush potential because we've got 3 to a flush. And then this could also be, in some cases, really weak gutters. So let's say on 7-6 Queen, we've got like 5-3. So what is that? Am I doing that right? 5-6, 7-6, 5, yes. So like something like 5-3. So we've got like undercards to the board, and it's like some of our weaker gutters. And then in some cases, on some boards as well, you'll see sort of like this bottom pair plus like backdoor kind of combination that fits into this category. So let's say a board like 9-3 deuce, you might see something like 2-4, 2-5. So you've got bottom pair and then some like backdoor straight draws that mixes into here. The third category, and this is the part that I would say is dramatically kind of like under continued with most players, including myself, is what we call like fake draws. Nick Petrangelo calls this like just like pure savagery, like bluffs, which is this idea of like you're really the weakest portion of your range, that's your weak backdoors, and this provides clearance and bluffs for later, where like again on like any runouts you're going to be able to still be able to pull bluffs from it. It's usually going to be this similar pattern of like one high card, one low card. You've got like a backdoor flush draw. You got some. I mean, in this case, you don't have any backdoor straight draws, but you've got some like super weak backdoors. And this portion, actually, these 3 and 2 really serve to support 1, in the sense that, like, whenever a spade comes on the turn, we want to have single spade cards in our range that can continue bluffing. We don't want to only have King 9 of spades, and then a spade comes on the turn, and we always have value now on every turn card that's a spade. We want to have hands like King of Spades 6, so we can continue bluffing when another spade comes, and then potentially barrel again on the river. So that's really the purpose of 3 and 2, is that when you do turn value with your obvious equity stuff, that you still have bluffs on your, you still have bluffs in your range. Any questions on these 3? We're going to go into we're going to spend the majority of today really kind of focus on a couple examples. But any questions on these kind of like 3 breakdowns or 3 types for constructing your bluffing range?
Victor, examples of 2 and 3?
We're going to go example flops.
Okay.
So we're going to look at example flops, and we're going to look at like what portions of the chart, and now I'll flip it to you guys, and like where do you guys think now that you started to think about your bluffing range in these 3 categories, I'm going to ask you guys to think about what are the kind of hands that fall into each of these on different kinds of flops. Okay, cool. If no questions, then let's jump into the first one.
Victor, did you want to be recording?
It is recording.
Is it?
It's not from my phone. I'm using OBS.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But thank you. Thanks for checking. Okay. So first flop, 9-3 deuce. So again, assume we check. We're gonna see a bet from the in-position player quite an often amount of time. It's close to a range bet. Usually they might be mixing some sizings, but let's just assume they're betting for a small sizing. And then now we're thinking about our continuation range. So, I mean, there's like the value portion of our range, which is going to be, we're going to have some sets here. We're going to have like good 9s here that are going to be check raising a lot. Actually, that's a kind of like a sidebar, is what I see a lot is like people aren't check raising for value enough with the 9x in their range here, which I think we're just like losing a lot of value by not check raising with these hands when they're going to have a really wide c betting range, a lot of 2 over cards. that are still going to call to our check raise that we can just get immediate value from, and we might not be able to get good runouts to continue getting value later on. The tieback, by the way, I mentioned we do some tieback to cash games, is when we're playing in tournaments where, let's say, the stack size is like 50 big blinds or less, you're going to see a lot more check raising with those like king 9, ace 9, queen 9, jack 9 kind of hands. You see that a lot less in deep stack cash games, primarily because we want to be a lot more like nutted in our range, and we want to be a lot more careful when you're playing a lot deeper, and you don't want to necessarily inflate a pot where you might just end up by the river with just top pair, decent kicker, but it's not necessarily anywhere close to the nuts, or even you get an overcard run out and then now you have maybe second or third pair. So that's kind of the main difference, is you're going to be seeing a lot less check raising with that like 9x portion of your range when you're like 100 big blinds deep, versus when you're shallower, you're happy to just kind of like check raise here and then you might just get it in on certain runouts. But so now on this flop, what do we think are our strong draws? So like our obvious equity stuff.
All the flush draws.
Yep, a bunch of the flush draws. On that note, are there any? Would you break down your flush draws? Like, would you look to check raise all of your flush draws? Would you want to, let's say, just check call some of your flush draws? And how would you split that?
I mean, it depends. So if you're just playing JPV, I'd probably go for all flush draws to be check raising in this spot.
Okay.
Just because the board favors the big blind.
Okay. I wouldn't say this board entirely favors the big blind. I think it runs closer equity-wise. But yeah, we definitely have like a lot of low cards that will interact with this. And what I'm getting at is that not all flush draws are equal. And I won't spoil it yet because I'll just see if anyone else has a way. But basically what you're saying is you like all your flush draws, like you would check raise at a decent amount, and then do you pure check raise all your flush draws? Do you how do you think about mixing check calling?
In this case, probably yes, because I probably am not the one that finds the check raises with the fake draws or the weak draws. So I think that's how my range is working right now.
Interesting. Okay.
That's how I think about it right now.
So you're thinking it's harder for you to find those like really hard to find continues. So like the ones that I know I get to check raise sometimes, I'm just gonna check raise them at 100% frequency.
Yeah. So like in this case, I think if you have 7-6 with one spade,
yeah,
that's like a good weak or fake draw to kind of check raise on. I don't think I can find that, or I don't find that today. So I guess to compensate for that, I probably end up check raising my flush draws.
Right. So for anyone playing On God today, when you get check raised in the spot and a spade comes on the turn, just fold. Just fold, because he's check raising all of his flush draws. Okay. Anyone else? Other hands that you think would qualify the strong draws? Yes.
Flush draw.
Straight flush draw. Yeah. So like 4-5, or just straight draws like a 4-5, right?
Even like ace 5 suited.
Ace 5 suited. You got some back doors. Yeah. Ace 5, ace 4. Like ace 5 of hearts. You got back doors, hearts, and you have like an immediate gut shot.
Yeah.
Cool.
I would even say like 5-6.
Yep. 5-6
of hearts as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because any 8, any 7, any heart, you're pretty happy with. And obviously, gutter.
Yeah. So some of our stronger gutters for sure. Yeah, will fall in this first strong draw. So I'm gonna come back to my question now about. I mentioned that not all flush draws are equal. So I'm curious if anyone else here is splitting which flush draws they're check raising with or maybe check calling with, and how you guys think about that. Or is everyone here mostly just check raising with every flush draw?
I'd be kind of tempted to check raise my flush draws that have less showdown value if I'm gonna be like barreling every street. Like if I have jack 8 of spades here, I don't expect like jack high to win very often, and even like if I pair an 8, it might not win. So I might check raise that more than if I had like king queen of spades. I might still think I have showdown value. I might think I can win by being a king or queen, and I don't need to run like a 3-street bluff.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Anyone to add to that? I think Ozzy, you have similar concept. Gabe, were you gonna say the same thing?
I was gonna say my weakest flushes, I'm probably mixing, because in the cases where you're getting call down, you're likely to run into someone who, when the flush completes and is continuing to match your aggression, has a similar hand class, and if you have a weaker flush, is likely to have a stronger one. Or like within their range, have a stronger one.
You're saying if like based on certain runouts, you're more likely to check raise with your weaker flushes, because then you can generate folds from like higher flushes that are beating you at showdown. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you're asking me what I would mix with. I would mix in those situations where I have like a very weak one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what would you do with your higher flush draws?
Probably also mixing.
Okay, so mixing both.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, what Peter said is kind of on the money on really how we want to think about our flush draws. So you are going to see the computer check call more with their ace high and their king high flush draws. And even some of the straight draws that you mentioned, like ace 5, ace 4 on this board, it just has showdown value with an ace. So it's going to do a lot more check calling, and you're seeing a lot more check raising from your flush draws or your draws that just don't have showdown value. And especially in this formation, we're seeing like a button open, a pre-flop open of like, it's like a 50% range almost. And when we think about the range, like the bottom offsuit combination of the range is, I believe it's either like 7x or 8x, meaning like they're opening every offsuit 8, like queen 8 off, jack 8 off, etc. And so what that means is when we talk about what are our most efficient bluffs, it's how many hands in our opponent's range that they fold that we're just like immediately behind. And the larger that is, our bluff is more efficient. So when we start bluffing with a lot of hands with cards below the 8, if we know they open up every offsuit 8x, and we bluff with like 7-5 with 1 spade or something, and we get like a lot of those hands to fold, that's an extremely efficient bluff. So that's why we tend to want to bluff more here with kind of the ones that don't have showdown value, especially a lot of stuff in that like lower card region, you'll see it like below an 8. But yeah, so that's kind of our strong draws. Now, what do we think about weak draws on this board?
Well, the backdoor flush draws, hearts.
Yep, backdoor flush draws.
Backdoor straight draws, maybe 7, 8, or something like that.
Yeah.
With maybe 1 spade.
Yeah, backdoor flush draws, backdoor straight draws.
Ignorant straight.
Sorry?
Straight drubbing on the lower end.
Straight draw on the lower end. So, I mean, some of those will fall into like the tier 1. But it's mostly going to be a lot of backdoor stuff that wraps around these cards. So like, yeah, like 10-8 with a spade, Jack 8 with a spade, 7-6 with a spade, or like 10-8 with 2 hearts, like these kind of things. So you've got like a backdoor straight, backdoor flush draw. They're usually wrapping around these cards. How many of you guys find those as check raises right now? And be honest. Okay, so one person, which is really good because it shows that we're probably all under continuing and we're over folding. And when we talk about like, usually when people come to me with like hand histories, like we talk about, okay, they talk like, it's like a big river decision usually, right? So it's like, okay, they bet like huge on this river. I had no idea what to do. Do I check? Do I fold? And what is happening like consistently and where like weaker players are making mistakes is if you fold like, I don't know, 10-8, 1 spade here, like 100% of the time, we're over folding and we're just getting pummeled. We're just like losing EV every time we make that fold. And you do that, and this spot is gonna pop up like 100 times over the course of like, you know, several hours of play, versus like that one situation where you're like dead focused on that like big river spot. So when we talk about really like improving our game, is we really want to get good at first pre-flop ranges, but then these most common flop spots, and making sure that we're continuing with the right range, defending with the right range, and bringing aggression with the right portions of our range so that we have bluffs to support our value on every single run out. Okay, so the last one before we look at the actual solve of this, but fake draws. What do you guys think are the fake draws on this board? I guess it's, yeah.
Maybe something like king 4 offsuit, like no spade. Just because it has that backdoor potential, it's still very weak.
Yeah, so it's, I'll say you're usually going to have a spade in it, but yes, that's exactly the idea. So king 4 off. Any other guesses, or do you want to add on to that? What are other ones you throw into this?
No, that's just kind of what popped in my head.
Okay, Gabe?
Maybe like king, queen, king, jack with a spade. So you have two overs. You're kind of falling into a potential straight draw with any 10 or any other, like a 10 or queen in those examples.
Yes, though I would say, sorry, not exactly, because those hands are gonna be higher up in like just how much immediate value they have, and probably fall closer to your tier 2, because they're not as like airball-y as some, like king queen is not as airball-y as something like king 4.
Right.
So like king queen, you've got a lot of options of making, like, you know, you got coverage if a king comes, a queen comes, a 10 comes, a jack comes, like you all of a sudden make kind of like a decent hand. Whereas like king 4, it's like unless you get exactly like a king on the turn, like most runouts, you're just gonna end up with like air or close to air, which is kind of the concept of these like fake draws. Is usually we're gonna end up with like pretty much like dust by the river. But yeah, so king 4, king 5, king 6, kind of basically the cards that interact with when we do make our tier 1 hand or like our strong draws. We want to have some interaction to block those and be able to keep bluffing. So when like a 4 or like a 5 comes or like a 6 comes, like we've got now like a gut shot to the straight, or we can block it and we continue bluffing. Or when a spade comes, as we mentioned, like we can continue bluffing as if we had the flush. Cool. Any questions about that before we take a look? Yeah.
Would as a fake draw, like ace, let's say below 8 to 2, but offsuit, of course, and like 1 spade, would that be a fake draw as well?
Ace, so like ace 8, is that what you're
Like
saying?
ace 7, ace 6.
Ace 6 certainly. I think the main thing here is less so ace 7, because we don't really, I mean, we've got the ace for the backdoor straight, but you're gonna see less of it with ace high in general, because ace high just has some more like showdown value, like could just be the best hand a lot of time on especially these boards where our opponent's going to be c-betting a wide range. So we're going to see less check raising when we've got like an ace x, especially on this kind of board. So it's not as dusty as a hand.
Oh.
Yeah. Whereas like our opponent's going to have a lot of ace x in their range that's opening from the button. So like our king x kind of hands, or like let's say like a queen x, queen 6 off, is just like, it just doesn't have as much immediate equity, so it's a lot more dustier, so they would fall more into this category. Yeah, but good question.
How about like jack 10 off, queen 10 off?
Yeah, jack 10 off, queen 10 off, yes, and I would say those fall more into your weak draw category. Yeah, because they wrap around more on the high card, they've got the backdoor straights, they've got 2 overcards to the board as well instead of just 1. So usually your fake draws are going to be kind of like a high-low combo with some like weak backdoors, is what you kind of see as the general theme. Yeah, but that is really important that we are finding check raises with like the jack 10, the queen 10, like these kind of hands as well. Like we don't want our entire portion of our check raise range to be all these cards below like a 7 or an 8, because then we really struggle on certain runouts to be able to, well, one, like represent value, but then also have certain bluffs. Because when we do have a lot of cards below the 8 as well, like sometimes like our opponent's gonna have like the 6-5 suited or the 4-5, and it becomes really hard for us to bluff when we're interacting with the range of hands that we want to eventually end up folding, right? So anyways, that's a good concept, a good call on the jack 10. So we'll look first at the, so this is kind of like the button range. So again, I just forced it to be like a small, like I think like around 25% bet. So it's betting almost range. So yeah, in this case, like the pure is, I think we talked about like what's the worst offsuit like hand that's always betting. So like in this case it's 8, like 7 starts to mix. But we see every offsuit 8x, it's starting to, it's basically betting, and like almost all the time. So that's why we're gonna see when we go to our check raising range a lot of cards below that, because it's just really efficient bluffs when we get like a bunch of these kind of hands, obviously not the 9, but like a bunch of those kind of hands to fold. And then, so now this is what the continuation range looks like. So kind of a lot of the things that we kind of covered. So when we talk about first, like immediate value. So like, for example, when we talked about first that like our strong flush draws are generally not check raising. So you'll see like a lot of these like suited ace x, like these are a lot of these, there's like our flush draws, obviously non-flush draws in here as well, but they're all check calling. like a lot of our like stronger suited kings are all check calling, like zero check raise. And then now we're starting to see like check raises with like this is like queen six of spades, this is queen five of spades. Some of this I think it's mixing some like queen four of hearts and stuff like that. So yeah, you're seeing like a lot of like check raises now with the flush draws that are kind of in this middling portion that have less immediate value. And then we talked about kind of like our weak, or this is also kind of like in the stronger draw. So this was what on 9-3 do. So yeah, we've got like gut shots. Some of these are like backdoor flush draws or immediate flush draws with gut shots and straight. So you're seeing like a lot in this portion as well. And then kind of we talked about this portion. So this is where like for a large part of my game and still even like right now is like this is like all of our fake draws, right? Like there's just a complete like pure savagery that like most people are just like not finding. So this is like king of spades 6, king of spades 5, king of spades 4, queen of spades 6, queen of spades 5. You're seeing some of like this starts to fall into some of like the weak draw category because we wrap around the 9, the 10-8, the 10-7, etc. But like really kind of like this portion, yeah. So it just kind of like illustrates how aggressive this strategy is and how much we're continuing. I mean, we're continuing with like 70% of hands, and it's like an 18% check raise. And the last thing I'll call out from like the value portion is like I do find I'm seeing like a lot of like lower stakes players just really not finding enough check raises as well. So when we talk about value, like a lot of it is coming from those 9x. So just something to keep in mind when you're check raising for value here.
Why the lower 9x's? Why are those also getting check raised?
Cheap here.
No, the 8, 9, 9, 7.
They're just strong enough. Like a 9x when your opponent is literally betting almost 100% of their range and has like a lot of just like overcards. Like these are strong enough where they're just not going to really have a ton of great runouts to get more value down the line. But you can see they're like mixing. Like check calling is obviously totally fine. If it's ever mixing, the EV is basically the same. But yeah, it's just good enough to check raise for value right now as well.
Are those 9 and flush draws?
Are those these?
Yeah, like the 9-7, 9-6. Are they 9-7, 9-6 of spades, or?
It's that. Good question. Actually, that might be it. Let me take a quick look.
Oh,
Yeah, because then you have top pair and flush draw.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, but I have it pulled up here.
Probably. Well,
But any other questions in the meantime as I'm looking at this?
he said
They are. No, not all of them actually. So 9-6 is flush draw. 9-7 is, so 9-6 through 9-8 is flush draw. 9-5 it's like even, it's mixing with all of them, even non-flush draw. But I think you could just take away that like, yeah, the main concept there is like weaker or middling 9s, yes, it contains the flush draw. So you've got a little more equity. Oh yeah, great call, I got
the continuing rate for the button is 100%, I think.
You mean the C bet?
Yeah.
The C bet was like 92, close to a range bet. Yeah, it was like 91.8 or something like that. Yeah.
How come we're raising the weak aces? Do we think that they have enough showdown value?
They do. It's mixing. It's mostly calling. Like you see here, it's like 70 to 80% calling. So it is meant to like check raise sometimes. It's kind of like it's still support. It's like a decent bluff, but it's mostly calling.
And is it most likely with the ace of spade or?
I would guess it's actually. I mean, I don't even guess. I'm looking right here. Yeah, it's all with aces. You're seeing like your ace of spades is the one that wants to do it the most. And then it's doing it a bit sometimes with like the 5 of spades, but with the ace, only with the 5 of spades is the ace of hearts. So you've got like kind of like a double backdoor. Yeah, it's only doing this if it has ace of hearts or ace of spades. Yeah. So like it has the heart so that like if it comes heart, we can start bluffing and represent not flush, and then obviously with the spade on certain spade runouts. Yeah. Cool. I think one really important thing to kind of call out here as well is that, and these are like really tough kind of continues to find, is like on all those bluffs that we talked about with check raising, we're also meant to check call with them as well. So like hands like the king 6, like king 5, king 4, the 10-8, which if we're not finding check raises for these, like I think again this comes down to like probably a lot of these are going to be what feels like maybe more trivial folds, and this is where we just are getting like torched from an EV perspective if we are folding these, especially to a range bet. And these are kind of what allow us to really take some like delayed bluff lines down the road as well. For the same reason that we want to start check raising these and we want to have so that we can have bluffs on every run out, we also want to have bluffs in our check call line. If we're calling with too much equity on the flop, then it doesn't allow us to bluff on similar types of runouts that we talked about on the check raising side. So just something to consider.
So are those things kind of like floating out of position? Is like the idea? Because like the range is so wide on the button, and you can call and be ahead enough that you will expect a lot of check backs from the button on turn to be able to blast off on the river, or check raise on, well, blast off on the river.
So the concept here, so you're asking like yes, these are like your floats. And not necessarily because we think we have the best hand right now, but these are the hands that you're gonna see most often, almost always, become your like best bluffs on certain runouts. So when you've got like King of Spades 6, and it goes, let's say check on like a non-spade turn, and then a spade comes on the river, right? Like this is gonna be like a hand class that you're seeing basically bluff 100% of the time. And so it's just, again, to support the fact that we have enough bluffs on those kind of runouts, that we're not just like check calling only with our spades, only with either like our immediate draws or like a pair. Yeah.
Is it like a hand, well, like a hand like 10-8 off, you would still want a harder spade in order to...
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, so I would, if I take a look at this, I would guess, yeah, exactly. It's, you're folding anything without a heart or spade, so like the 10-8 off here, it's all, you have to have a heart or spade in your hand.
In order to be able to represent it later, okay.
Yeah.
And then lastly, this assumes that it's a small continuation bet, like if the bet.
This is a small continuation bet at a very high frequency.
Okay.
Yeah.
If the bet were to bet big, then obviously our range changes, and we're not
Yes.
talking about that.
Yes, and we'll talk about we're going to look at another flop where it's not
Okay.
a pure C bet, but you're going to see a similar theme. Like even though we're looking at in this case, like this probably seems like very aggressive. Like I would, like it sounds like most folks are not continuing with like 70% plus of the range, and they're not check raising a lot of these hands. But this concept doesn't just exist because our opponent bet range here. We're going to see it even on flops where like they're only betting like half of the time, which is kind of one of the next examples. But yeah.
Sir, this chart is based on the assumption of what bluff from, or what bet from the button.
1 point, so 25%. 25% top.
Okay.
Yeah, B25. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next example. So A7-7, 2 spades. What do we think are strong draws here? Anyone? Guesses? Yeah.
5-6 of spades would be a strong draw.
Yeah, so flush draws, yeah, with some backdoor straight, yeah, potential. Yeah, basically flush draws, I mean, any of our flush draws really, but yeah, so the ones that also have backdoor straight is great. What about our weak draws?
Maybe like 8-9 with one heart, or even 8-9 without a heart or spade would be a weak draw. You just have backdoor straight.
Yes, but I would prefer to have at least one spade. So 8-9 with a spade, 8-9 with 2 hearts. You're not really gonna see it with 8-9, no heart, no spade. But yeah, so it's gonna be like 8-9, so it interacts around the 7 and has both backdoor flush, backdoor straight draws. These are kind of like our weak draws.
So would that 8-9 offsuit, like no heart, no spade, would that just be clumped in with the big draws?
No.
It's just
8-9, no heart, no spade is mostly gonna fall into just like a fold
Just
category. It's just
fold.
not strong enough.
Okay.
We're not really gonna get to bluff, or we shouldn't really be bluffing with these kind of hands when we don't have blockers or interaction with like certain runouts. So yeah, like we're just gonna be folding that a decent amount of time. Is usually if we don't have like the harder spade. Yeah. The other portion here is like 2-4 with hearts or like with a spade. I mean, we're not going to have as much offsuit combination of these, but like 2-4, 2-3, 2-5, like the suited combos with the heart.
How would you classify Jack 10 with a backdoor flush draw, considering it can run into cheat straights? Cheat different ones.
That would be weak draw category, yeah, Jack 10. So it's got like 2 backdoor straight draws and then also got the backdoor flush draw with a spade or if it's 2 hearts, yeah.
What about Queen King suited?
What suits?
Spade.
Queen King of Spades that's gonna be like one of your strongest draws here.
Okay.
But it'll fall kind of into the category of like it is literally our strongest flush draw.
Or it could potentially hit a straight, you know, like a real straight, you know, like
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's super
Or
strong
even
on
a real
sport.
flush. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So that would be a strong draw, right?
it would be a strong draw, and it comes back to like this is a hand that we're gonna be check calling way more often than we are check raising, because it's just like I mean king high on an ace high board, we're just gonna have the best hand a decent amount of time against our opponent. So
Of course.
yeah.
Okay.
But it is definitely a strong draw, yeah.
If we did have 8-9 on this board, we kind of block 7-8 and 9-7, which is some of like the natural 7x hands they have. So would that make it more likely to be a good bluff candidate, or is that not a good way to think?
No,
Because you
it's
still have like King 7, Jack 7, so on, those kind of hands.
yeah, we definitely do interact because like if they're raising from the button, they're gonna have a bunch of these like offsuit combinations of 7x, and we block them of course with 7 if we have an 8 in our hand. We just don't want to overdo it with every combination of 8-9, and we want to have what I'll call like I guess optionality and playability. Like when you have 8-9, no heart, no spade, you shouldn't really be bluffing on like many runouts here. Except for like, you know, you interact with some like runner straight sort of potential hand. But you're not gonna be able to bluff on like spade runouts or heart runouts without a spade or a heart. Otherwise you're just gonna be overdoing it. And then not having the blocker in your hand is gonna be pretty detrimental.
Yeah. How about a 3 or 5? One of them is a spade. That could be a weak hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that has like multiple links to a straight, whether with a 7 or with
Yeah, so that's like what some of our weak draws for sure.
Yeah. Offsuit.
Yeah.
But one is a spade. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draws.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, what do we think about fake draws? So we talked about strong draws, we talked about weak draws.
Is it the same as before? Kind of like a king spades 3 off, like king 3 off king spades?
Yes, so we're gonna see some of that. Again, it's that like high-low combo, but yeah, king 3, king 4, and with the king of spades, most importantly, and we'll be able to rep and bluff on like a spade run out, and then some like straight-ish run outs with that low card. So let's take a look. So this is the buttons range, first off, which I want to call a couple of important things, which on this board, it's only a 50% c-bet. I put it at B40, so betting 40% of pot. But with this sizing, you're seeing the in-position player bet only 50% of the time. And actually, I want to point out a really important thing too as well, because I think generally a lot of players are going to be just like c-betting way too often. And I think actually on most flops, c-betting way too often, because they're taking this general like meta of like, I'm the pre-flop aggressor, you know, I have range advantage, I just get to bet a lot. And when players play like that, that's actually what makes kind of like our close EV, like check raise or continues, much more valuable, because instead of betting a 50% range, they're betting like 70% of the range or 80% of the range. And so when we check raise with those close spots, they're no longer close, they're like very clearly printing EV for us when our opponents are betting flops way too often. But you'll see kind of like our very clear checks are going to be a lot of these pairs between like the ace and the 7. So like 8 through king is just like all checking here, because it doesn't really benefit from betting. It's going to get called up by like ace x or like, and then it's just going to fold out a lot of hands that were already ahead. So again, it's like how many better hands do we fold, and how many worse hands do we get to call is usually how we think about like driving our most efficient bluffs. And when there's like very slim ranges on both those sides, then we're just going to be driven to a lot more check heavy. But then it's mixing with like a lot of this other stuff. But I'll say like most people when they have something like queen deuce suited on this board, they're just gonna like bet that 100% of the time because they're like, oh, I got just like absolute air. Like I just want to bet. I can ref an ace and I'll just get them to fold a lot. And that's where like I would say like weaker players or players who are less studied, they're gonna feel a lot less comfortable checking back just like some of their complete air, which again makes our check raise when we're out of position so much more valuable. So that's that range for them betting. So this is our response to that range. So again, we'll see, so a lot of our strongest flush draws, so all the king X flush, in this case like an ace is a pair. So like these are no longer like just our flush draws, but all our king X flush draws, a lot of them, the higher ones are just check calling for the most part. And then we're starting to see the check raises. So like this sliver, these are just the queen 5 suited with the flush draw. So you're seeing like almost like a pure check raise with all of our queen flush draws, our jack flush draws, 10 flush draws. So those are kind of like our more immediate like strong draws. We talked about kind of like our weaker draws, like the backdoor. So you're seeing like a lot of check raise from like this portion. So this is like backdoor straight draw plus like flush draw kind of hands, which I'm guessing probably a lot of people are missing. And then again, we mentioned that like king of spades 5, king of spades 4, queen of spades 6, queen of spades 5, just those like complete pure savagery like fake draws. So again, you'll see the same pattern, even though in this case, the in-position player is only betting 50% of the time versus like a complete range bet.
5-4 suited backdoor, 5-4 hearts.
5-4 of hearts. This one?
Yeah.
Yes, most likely, yes. Yeah, 5-4 of hearts. It's definitely gonna have the hearts and the spades.
And the spades.
Yeah. Yeah, so 5-4. It's exactly 5-4 spades and 5-4 of hearts. Like those, yeah. Yeah, because we're only calling, for the 5-4 suited.
And
But-
sorry.
No,
the
go ahead.
pocket pairs, are they with the spade in hand and the heart in hand? Is that why they're check raising?
Are you talking about the 5s, the
fives,
4s?
spades, and deuces.
Um,
Or does that not matter?
it is, yes, it's only with the hearts and the spades. It's only with the heart. You see it like a very, very small sliver. Like it's basically negligible with like 5 of diamonds, 5 of clubs. You see it like literally at like, what is this? 5%. Like it's super small. Like it's basically negligible. Like if you're gonna start check raising with 5s or 4s here, then you always want to have a heart or a spade in your hand. Which is a general concept to consider when you are thinking about constructing your bluffing ranges again, and really helps to ensure that you're not overdoing it, but you want to have interaction again with the board, whether wrapping around some of the cards or like at least the suits as well. Yeah.
One similarity that I'm seeing between the two situations is that when you have like the almost the nuts, like a 7x on this board, you're almost like check raising 100% of the time. And that's something I noticed on the other one.
Yeah.
So is that just so we can like balance it with like our garbage bluffs, like the king 4 off here?
What do you think?
I want to follow that principle.
Why do you think that is?
That's why I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, look at how many hands we're bluffing with, right? Like, look at how many. Like, this is a 26, 27% check raise range, which I feel like in reality, like people are check raising like 10% or less. So it just goes to show like we get to be really aggressive, and we just have so many like airball. Like, I mean, not complete airball. Obviously, we've got draws and like backdoor stuff, but we're just meant to be so aggressive. So when we're meant to be that aggressive, like, all of our value, we just also get to check raise with all of our value. Because we talked about like the whole reason why we want to build this continuation range. Once our opponents are seeing that we're check raising with king of spades 5, they're like never folding to like or they shouldn't be like with a lot of their like overcards, ace highs, like a lot of they're gonna have some of this like weak backdoor stuff themselves that they should be defending against our check raise here. At least if they're like a studied thinking player. So yeah, we just get to squeeze out so much value when we're check raising here with our good hands.
And now 10-8, like a hand like 10-8 isn't calling much on a side or stuff like that. Right, whereas before it's like you can call for the ideas we were talking about before.
10-8 on the other board, because it was 9-3 deuce, you have 1 overcard to the 9. So I think that's a big difference here. Like you can just spike a 10 and then just have top pair. Whereas here, like if your opponent has an ace, like a 10 is not as valuable. If you hit on turn, you've got some reverse implied odds as well, and you probably can't fold a lot of turns once you hit a 10 or an 8. And then, I mean, we still have like this same, I guess, like portion. This is probably like all the 10-8s that have a heart or a spade again that are like check raising here. That's like one of our weak draws. But yeah, the main thing driving the folds is just like we don't have any overcards here, so we can't necessarily just like spike a 10 and then just now all of a sudden have the best hand all the time.
So it's kind of like a junky, like it gets downgraded to like a junky bluff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's still in our like tier 2, I guess, like our weak draws.
Right, 'cause it's
But yeah, we're just not floating with like a lot of the like the non-heart or spade portion of our 10-8 offs. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Anything you guys found surprising?
And then defending with 5-3 off and 5 deuce off, pre-flop. I don't know if I would find that.
Yeah, against button, we're defending super wide. Like we're only folding like this, I think it's really kind of like this small, like the triangle or whatever you call it. I think some people call it like this like trash triangle or something. But yeah, like we're defending super wide, like 90% plus or something like that. Yeah, Alice.
If you were to check call, like for you personally, in this spot with like king 6 off, like pretty bad hand, and the river comes like, sorry, not river, the turn comes like offsuit 2. What's your strategy in this spot?
Yeah, so
Or maybe
turn.
not something that specific like an offsuit 2, but what if like a card comes that just doesn't help you?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. We think about like now how do we start continuing on turns and rivers? I think the best will be to take a look, because I can tell you like I don't call king 6 off, like, or like I don't continue as much as I should. But let's take a look, and I'll throw it on the screen. So we'll say we check call, right? And let's throw in like an offsuit deuce. What do you think? What do you think we're meant to do on this sort of card?
Probably check fold to another bet.
Okay.
Would be my guess.
So actually, before I show this, so you would say you would just check when a 2 comes, and then
King
fold to
6
another
off.
bet. Huh?
Yeah, if I have king 6 off, yeah, I'm check folding.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, so we can take a look. Like we're just meant to check 100% of the time here. Actually, in this check call line, like we shouldn't have. This is different from if we were check raising. But like this is a turn card that we're just never meant to have any donk bets at all. So we're just checking here, and we're like, we didn't call with a hand like king high to now like start blasting on a card like this, right? Like we called with king high to maybe get to showdown sometimes where king high can just be good if we go check. 2, to be able to start bluffing on a spade turn or a spade river. When you get like a big card like this is very likely just gonna fall into like our check fold range, like as you mentioned. So let's just say they bet this size, which is, what is that, like 60% of the pot. Okay, I'm wrong. I mean, it's folding a lot of the time, like the king highs. I guess king 6 off specifically. I don't know why it's like calling there like 40% of the time. But most of our king X, so like a lot of that stuff that fell into like our really crappy stuff, you'll see like these are all basically folding like 90%. And this is one of those weird things where, why is it? King of hearts, 6 of spades, it's like calling 80% of the time. I don't know why it's doing that, but like for me, I can tell you I'm just folding as played if I call the king 6 on the flop, and then this is the turn card that we get. Because this is not the turn card we're looking for to start like applying pressure. Yeah. But good question.
Victor, could I speak to this for a minute?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think, like practically in game, it's worth remembering that most of the people you're playing against, they haven't like looked at this particular spot on the turn. So I think like studying this spot gets you to this point in the hand. But in my experience, an opponent who bets this turn, they're probably they probably either always have an ace or a 7 when they bet, like that's probably the biggest category of opponents, and then there's a smaller subcategory of opponents that like could do this as a bluff. So I think it's okay against the majority of your opponents to always fold king 6 here, unless you're playing against somebody who is just gonna barrel 3 streets when they have jack 10, you know, or queen jack or something like that, or it'll just always barrel their flush draws. But you can use your judgment, I think, in this spot and think, hey, this person is either way over bluffing or they're never bluffing. And that's how I would make a decision, like with king high or any bluff catcher. And like even like, you know, pocket 3s, pocket 4s, like am I gonna continue here? It's just based on my opponent. Like they're not gonna be as balanced as they're supposed to be, so we don't need to be as balanced as we're supposed to be, is how I look at it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, this is all, the importance of looking at these charts is not to play exactly like this, but like a lot of people will say like, I'm trying to like, oh, like, I don't need like a chart, so I'm just like exploiting my opponents. But what does it mean to exploit? Like you're saying like, okay, I'm playing a lot more aggressively or I'm playing like tighter, but from what baseline, right? So all of this is like, you can't say you're playing a lot more aggressive if you don't know what you're deviating from. And that's the biggest thing, is like understanding how your opponents are potentially deviating from what is like theory optimal, and then how you will then counter adjust. But I'd say like as general population tendencies that are really good to keep in mind, the check raise on the flop as a bluff overperforms because your opponents aren't going to be 3-betting you, sometimes literally not at all, and then they're not going to be continuing or defending with as wide of a range as they should be. But then conversely, what that means is then on turns, when we bet turn after check raising flop, that generally underperforms because their range on the turn is now going to be a lot tighter than it should be. So we're going to generate a lot fewer folds. They're going to be calling with a lot more equity-driven things. So we have to think about like how do their like deviations influence how we want to adjust our ranges, like our check raise. Like a lot of the times, like the goal is like, okay, check raise flop, get them to fold a ton of their crap, like right then and there. And then we generate a ton of EV, and then we don't get like the turn card that we want, and like, or maybe we do get a turn card that we want, but it's a close bet, and we think with how we think that they're defending on the flop, like it's just not worth betting, and we can just give up. Like we definitely want to be careful there. But I think Peter brings up a great point that like kind of like on runouts like these, like it's going to be pretty heavily under bluffed by population. So we don't need to find a really hard continues on the turn here, like. For whatever reason, king 6, I mean some of the other ones even here as well, but like you're seeing a lot of like the suited king X, king 6 suited, king 5 suited. I mean some of those are going to be your flush draws actually, so you are going to be wanting to continue some of those, but we don't need to find our super hard turn continuations where we see a spot that we think is generally under bluffed. But it does bleed into kind of like one of my most important takeaways from talking to Nick about this is when we get into this check raise or check call line on the flop and continue with a lot of these hands that feel very uncomfortable, one of the most played street or lines in poker period is the check raise, check call, and then check turn. And then now when we decide to bet the river, like our opponents are supposed to be calling us down with like, I mean on certain boards like ace high, queen high, that like people are just not finding. Like even the best pros are just like not finding a lot. So these are spots that we just end up printing. Like we don't always have to check raise flop and then like bet turn, right? Like we can check turn a ton and then find like a good river card for us to start bluffing. And almost always it's gonna be like a very profitable bluff for us to execute on the river. So it's something I'm working a lot on my game right now is like taking these like delayed bluff lines that can be super profitable because a lot of people like, and the problem when we don't continue with enough range on the flop is we just don't have those lines available to us at all. So it becomes extremely problematic on turns and rivers. Okay, did you have a question? No, okay. I think we're at time. We are at time. Okay, so we'll wrap here. Thank you guys. I hope to see a lot of aggressive play on flops today.